Hi, folks. This is Rich Palazzo from Thinking Accurately Education. I thought today I would start the YouTube video by talking about my background. Uh, Basically, for 21 years I was an IT guy, and we homeschooled our kids. We have 5 children, my wife and I, Teresa, and we um, homeschooled our kids through high school. Our children have gone on to be married and have children. They've gone to college, and uh, it's just wonderful experience. And along the way, we wrote a book, and as I had in the previous video, have been reading the book. The book is called The Bible, Christianity, and American Government, and chapter 2 is based on the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 27 through 28. All right, so let's get started. There's a quotation from Richard M. Nixon from October 25th, 1960, where he said, "We will lead the exploration of space because discovery is one of the tests of the vitality of a nation." At that time, Nixon was the vice president under Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the president at the time. But he was followed by President John F. Kennedy. And in 1962, in a famous speech, he said, "We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win." Jacqueline Kennedy, JFK's widow, once said at night, talking about JFK, she said, "At night, before we'd go to sleep, Jack liked to play some records, and the song he loved the most came at the end of this record. The lines we loved to hear were, 'Don't let it be forgot that once there was a spot for one brief shining moment that was known as Camelot.'" This was the America that I grew up in, filled with promise. I have often wondered, what went wrong? Why hasn't America fulfilled the potential we saw in those days? Well, the Bible says in Genesis 1:27 through 28 that God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." In these verses, God gave Adam and Eve 4 commands. 1, be fruitful and multiply, meaning reproduce, become numerous. 2, fill the earth, meaning spread out across it. 3, subdue it, meaning conquer it. 4, have dominion over it, meaning rule it. You see, man was created to be a conqueror, to gain mastery, but not over other men. He was supposed to explore the earth, study it, and figure out how to live upon it, all of it. But did you know that almost half of the earth is still uninhabited? If man's energies were invested in harnessing, exploring, studying, utilizing the resources of God's creation as God intended, the rest of the Earth's land surface, not to mention the ocean, the moon, and the other planets, could support a much greater population than we have today. Yet today, rather than facing these challenges, we talk about population control. Population control is defined as a policy of attempting to limit the growth in numbers of a population, especially in poor or densely populated parts of the world, by programs of contraception or sterilization. The 1972 report of the President's Commission on Population Growth and American Future concluded that no substantial benefits would result from continued growth of the nation's population. And in 1974, Henry Kissinger, who was then the assistant to the president for national security affairs, issued National Security Study Memorandum Number 200 that concluded that continued global population growth posed a grave security risk to the United States. Kissinger argued that we cannot wait for overall modernization and development to produce lower fertility rates naturally. He called for an all-out effort to lower growth rates. Specific strategies included undermining the traditional role of motherhood and concentrating on the education and indoctrination of the rising generation of children regarding the desirability of smaller family size. And in 1973, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in a 7-2 decision that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment is a fundamental right to privacy that protects a pregnant woman's choice whether to have an abortion. But the Bible says in Romans 1:21 through 22 that although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. Maybe that's what happened to America. Look at the space program today. Instead of planning colonies on the moon or on Mars, today we spend billions trying to find rocks with bacteria on them, hoping to find the origins of life. Our nation has truly lost its way. It seems that when the elimination of individual human lives for the perceived good of society at large became an option, society was no longer driven by the need for more living space. Yet it was that very need for living space that would have driven mankind to conquer the earth as God desired, or reach out into space as John F. Kennedy dreamed, and fulfill mankind's God-given potential. That's part of what people are talking about when they call for a culture of life rather than a culture of death. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963. The speech he was planning to give later that day, the speech that he did not live to deliver, included these words. We, he said, in this country, in this generation, are by destiny rather than choice the watchmen on the wall of world freedom. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and responsibility, that we may exercise our strength with wisdom and restraint. That must always be our goal. For as it was written long ago, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It raises some interesting points. In 1962, for example, President Kennedy appointed Byron White as justice to the U.S. Supreme Court. White turned out, interestingly, to be one of the two jurists who voted against Roe v. Wade. And he ended up writing the dissenting opinion, saying, "The court apparently values the convenience of the pregnant mother more than the continued existence and development of the life or potential life that she carries. I find no constitutional warrant for imposing such an order of priorities on the people and legislatures of the states." It leaves us with a lot to think about, doesn't it? All right, folks, thanks again for listening. This has been Rich Palazzo for Thinking Accurately Education. You can catch our podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts, I believe. And you can see our blog. We have a blog at thinkingaccurately.education.com. Thanks again. Have a great day. Bye now.